Hi, so my name is Joshua and I was going to do a little video today about how to drain batteries properly. So before I can actually give away a battery to be recycled, it has to be drained first of all of its energy. And I'm saying this mainly for lithium ion batteries. So I get a lot of defibrillator batteries, and they need to be, per our company's protocol, they have to be discharged first before they can be disposed of. So I used to use a resistor to drain capacitors, because capacitors have a lot of energy stored up inside of them. It's a capacitor, so it charges up quickly and releases all of its energy as soon as you want it to. So defibrillators have a tendency to hold on to that charge for an extended period of time. So I actually have my data sheet here from one of my defibrillators I tested, and this goes off of a defibrillator, so it's going to have a lot of energy, and it uses joules as the amount of energy. So 5 joules, 10 joules, 50, 100, and 200. This is a Zoll ProPack MD. LifePaks use different. Theirs goes up to, I think, 360 joules. So what does that mean? So 5 joules is equivalent to roughly 211 volts. And this is the lowest setting. Well, the lowest setting for this test. I think it goes down to 1. And the peak current is 4.2 amps. So not too much, right? Well, when you start testing these further and further, it gets a lot more intense. So let's see. So for 200 joules, that's the maximum the Zoll can do. It does. It averages, peak voltage is 1,527 volts. That's a lot of voltage. And peak current, 30.6 amps. So I don't know if you can see this, but that's the discharge. That's how quickly it discharges. So we're talking about 6 milliseconds it discharges, just like that. All 30 amps and 1,500 volts is discharged into a person. It's meant to stop a dysrhythmia. You can't restart a stopped heart. It's impossible. When someone's in the systole, you can't start that up again. You're gonna have to do some various measures. But anyways, so I have to discharge the capacitor in order to start working on it. So the same way goes for batteries. You can do the same thing with batteries. Just take a resistor, hook it up to the positive negative terminal, and let it sit and just discharge it. And the resistor that I typically use is a 5K 25 watt, and same way can go with the batteries. So what all do you need for this? Well, let's see. So what exactly do you need? Well, I bought a really cheap multimeter lead set, and these are brand new. These actually came from China, go figure. So these are the silicone based, but they were, I think it actually has the price on the back of it, $2.29. And I do mine a little bit different than other people that I've seen, and actually how the manufacturer did it, because I also want to see how much current is being drawn and how much voltage is being taken out. So I do mine a little bit different. So on that same note, so how you can normally use it is, here's my resistor right here. This is a 5K 25 watt, and it's a heat sink around a resistor. So you have your 2 leads right there, and typically how you would do it is hook positive up to one side and the negative lead to the other side, and that's how you do it. Well, the way I do it doesn't have to be, everyone's different. I do a 3-way wire connector. So what I'll do is trying to hold this up like this. So one wire connected up there to the other wire in the wire connector like so, and then the positive going to my source So this wire going to the source, and the other wire, the part that goes in the multimeter, going into the multimeter. So I'm able to pull, I'm able to see how much voltage is being drawn at the same time as I'm testing it. So it makes it a little bit easier. That's how I like to do it. And I also like, they make different kinds of wire connectors. I like the, I think it's by 3M, I'm not really sure. But they have, it's a heat shrink wire connector. So you crimp it at the top there, and you use a heat shrink or a heat gun, and it shrinks around your connector. But this is a little bit different in that it actually has an adhesive in it, so it makes it waterproof, makes it very difficult to pull back out, and also makes it quite permanent. So I also have some heat shrink tubing, same purpose. It has an adhesive lined inside of it. Wire crimpers, this is just a DeWalt brand. A very, very inexpensive heat gun from Harbor Freight. And some wire strippers, and I think that's pretty much it. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is prep my wires. So this is my cheap multimeter set, and I'm just going to cut, remember this is how I'm doing it, this is not how you have to do it, but I'm going to cut each one of them about the same length. And so I have two separate pairs. I have the part that goes to the multimeter, and I have the part that actually goes to the source that I'm pulling from. So at this point I can strip both ends here, and this is a very, and I think I said it before, these are silicone, so they're very pliable, they move, they're very flexible. I'm going to strip it, and you can see it's very, very small, maybe you can't see it, very small gauge wire. I'm not really sure what that is, probably a 22 gauge, 22 gauge. It's very, very small, but we'll be able to make it work. So strip your wires on both sides, and we'll get started on the next part. Okay, so it's actually about a 20 gauge, roughly. Well, according to this, it's about a 20 gauge. So I strip my wires about 1/4 of an inch, and now what I'm going to do is insert the wires accordingly. Insert the wires into the port of my wire connector here, and I'm going to crimp down in this area right here, and do that part next, and we'll start on the next. So do that for all the wires. So it'll go like this. So you're going to have one on this side, which will go into your multimeter, and another wire right here, which you'll have for your source. So you'll have, if you did it right, you'll have one left over, which will go to our resistor. So do that for both of them. Okay, so for the next part, we are going to, I have two jumper cables here, one red, one black. The black one, now this is a resistor, resistors don't have polarity. So the black one will go on the one side of the resistor, and the red will go onto the other side. Now one thing I recommend doing is putting a little bit of heat shrink tubing on the terminal to cover up, just to prevent from rusting or anything coming in contact with it. So just a little bit of heat shrink tubing, just enough to cover up the contact and your point. So you can keep these wires as long as you want, as short as you want, it really doesn't matter. But basically one side is going to go to the resistor, the other side is going to go into your tri-unit here, tri-connector, and it's going to get crimped. So that's the next step. So go ahead and start doing that. Alright, so for this next part, we're doing the soldering. I have my own soldering station here. It is a Metcal, a little bit more expensive than most. Very good unit though, but turn it on. Alright. Tin my tip a little bit. Alright, so I'm using no clean solder here. And what we're going to do is we're going to solder the terminals here with the wires on it. Now this already has flux built into it, so you don't have to worry about adding any flux. Alright, so we got our soldered connectors on. This wire was a little bit more of a pain to work with, but we're good to go. Turn that off, and now we're going to put some heat shrink tubing on the actual connectors itself to prevent anything from happening to it. Okay, so next step, after we got our wire soldered onto our resistor, and again, this is subjective, so you don't have to do it or whatever. I add some heat shrink tubing around the sides there to protect it. And the next part that we're going to do is we're going to strip these two wires and then add them to our cluster here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and we will then heat shrink our tubing, and that's basically it. Okay, so I just heat shrunk my tubing, and don't make the same mistake I did. And if you have the adhesive kind to touch it, I, for whatever reason, decided to touch it, and it's like hot glue. And it's very, very hot. So if you don't know what I mean by the adhesive, I'm going to try and find, this is still relatively warm. I just heat shrunk everything, but let's get out of my chair. So this is what it looks like. You have, focus. I don't know how to manual, there we go. So I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little bit of stuff coming out of the side there. That is actually the adhesive part, and it seals it all in. It seals, it keeps out, let's just put it this way, it keeps out anything that shouldn't be in there. So I don't know what this center piece is made out of. It's apparently, I've used it for many years. I've never really used it outside though. Granted, this is not going to be outside, but I've never had any one of these rust before, so I don't know what this is made out of. Aluminum, probably not aluminum. I don't know. I really have no idea what it's made out of. But I can tell you this part here, it seals out anything that shouldn't be in here that can corrode. Basically, the next part that we have to do is actually draining the battery. So we have our whole contraption. I know my one coworker always told me why I make things more complicated than what it really needs to be. It's just what works for me, right? Whatever works for you. And if this doesn't work for you, by all means do something else. So, but this part here, just for reiteration, this part here, this goes into your multimeter, hooks right in. Come on. A resistor right there, a little green piece hanging. And this part here, this goes to our source. So our source will be the batteries that we are draining, or technically this is set up for a capacitor too, the high drain or the high output capacitors. So whatever works. And I will be doing another follow-up video on how to drain batteries, how to drain lithium-ion batteries. This is not one I want to drain. It's actually my camcorder just died. It's a different battery. Right here, these are actually defibrillator batteries. These are old defibrillator batteries. So I actually cracked the case open just to see what was inside. And this is, I mean, the last time someone actually checked this was in 2002, and right now we are 2017. These have long since died, but they're each 2 volts, 2.5 amp hours. So they're technically already dead, but batteries like these will start to drain. So watch me in the next video then.